Good morning and welcome to uh, BlockTune Music, episode 2 of our weekly show. Today we're going to be talking about the music industry, a little bit about the current Web2 music industry. We're going to be talking about Bitcoin, L2 stacks, and looking at building a new music economy on Bitcoin through stacks. We're going to talk about what blockchain is, and then we're going to chat to my very special guest, Gary, about Gated. We're also just going to let you know a little bit more about When Walls Break, which is the first album that's going to be released on Gated on the 19th of November. So welcome to the show. I'm GoodKitty. I'm your host, and welcome to my special guest, Gary. How are you, Gary?
I am feeling good. Good morning. Nice Saturday morning. Weather's nice here in New York. Um, yeah, excited.
Yeah, it's so cool to have you. It's a Saturday afternoon where I am. Also a beautiful day. I've got kids swimming in the pool next door, so lots of fun out there. And
Super.
hopefully a lot of fun inside here too. So I think before we kick off, I just want to thank our sponsors, BitcoinLiveDB, for hosting the show for us today. And also that it is a live show. We don't have any Q&A, but please, if you can engage on social media, that would be awesome. So yeah, Gary, you have a very interesting journey from your beginnings in the USSR to the USA. Do you want to talk me through that? How this transition kind of shaped your path and led you to where you are, to your early career experiences in music, and eventually moving into technology?
Yeah, and thank you for having me. I'm super excited about BlockTune, where it's going, and everything that you do for the community and Stacks. And hi to everybody else that's watching. So, I sort of like have flashbacks to when I was a little boy. Um, and it was very, sort of what you would imagine life could look when you're living in sort of like this communist uh, economy, quote unquote, dynamic. We lived in these row houses where it was sort of this uh, project, if you will, of buildings that were put together specifically for certain members of society, and that's one of the interesting things that like I never even knew that they sort of divided society by what you did, and so the area that we lived, there was a lot of artists actually, and being that this was communism, you get things for free, which is sort of the other side of it, right? And we actually my dad, because of the work that he did, we had this apartment that we were given for free. And it wasn't big by any means. Um, it was sort of like a one bedroom, if I remember, kind of like that railroad kind of style apartment where you just have this one hallway and things are on each side. And then you have a kitchen as one of the rooms. And that's where I remember really growing up. I was outside a lot. I loved riding my bike and getting into trouble. But I do have amazing memories. I mean, the memories are very twisted because if I think about like the dynamics here and I think about, some of the things that went on there, it was just a little bit odd. I remember at a time when the ruble, which is like the Russian currency, was crashing. My dad would come home with bags of cash, like potato sacks of cash. It was just like I just remember all this money and like I didn't really understand. Later on, I first thought we were rich, and then I found out it really wasn't worth anything. And so, but it was all the little things. I remember, bananas, like they were a delicacy, and so like if there was a banana that you can actually buy, you generally eat it like before it ripened. And I until this day I generally prefer like bananas that have not really yellowed, and it's just one of those odd things, you know, and because like I guess I was sort of brought up in that world. Um, so it was a very interesting time, you know, specifically in this dynamic where, you know, everyone is supposed to be equal, where, you know, everyone is supposed to sort of go through this process and end up in the same place. But I could see the system breaking in that my dad had to sort of go beyond, to be able to provide for our family. And so my dad would actually, so a little backstory. My dad is a musician by trade, in the sense that he went to school, went to a conservatory, became a composer. And, you know, growing up, it was always music. We had sort of this like flat piano thing that goes against the wall, not one of those grand pianos, but you know, that thing that sort of is like you just get the keys and this
Yeah.
and the yeah. And you know, I always remember people coming around the house. Didn't really know who they were. Remember like people singing around my dad playing. Those are the memories I have. And you know, again, one of the more interesting things, as my dad got popular and he was what we would call a local celebrity. You know, like if he left Russia, nobody would know him. But there, you know, people sort of recognized him, knew him. He would get love letters sent home, which was kind of silly with my mom and everything. um, and so, you know, I kind of saw this like dichotomy, if you will, like this one world where everyone is equal, and this other world where my dad was sort of like this big, larger than life figure. And it was a very, very weird place to grow up in. Ultimately, you know, all that stuff sort of comes back at you. And you know, we were burglarized, you know, things were stolen from us. um, you know, just another random memory is my dad was one of the few people around us that had a car. And because he had a car, he'd get pulled over all the time. You know, bribery was just super easy, especially for the police. And they just make something up, ask him for money. And that type of lifestyle, you know, if you have kids and you have an opportunity to go somewhere else, you take that opportunity, you know.
Mm.
Came at a cost. Came at a cost. So
Mm. What an incredible story. You know, it's kind of like you said, things that you kind of take for granted, or that you're just never going to experience in a different country. And it's one of the things I love about working in Web3 is I've never before been exposed to so many cultures and so many different stories. It's really taken me out of my country and into the world in a way that I've never experienced, even though I've traveled a lot. I've traveled a hell of a lot. So, yeah, very interesting, Gary. Thank you for sharing that. Um, so, you kind of moved to the States and then you got involved um, with sort of a number of things, but it eventually led you into technology and and Bitcoin and then stacks. So do you want to tell us how you kind of eventually got here?
yeah, the orange pill story. Yeah, it was an amazing sort of moment for me. It was one of those things where it's like, you know, with this aha moment that you're sitting there and you're like, am I reading this right? You know, is this really what it says it is? And
Yeah.
yeah, you know, so I was always passionate about technology. It was something that just came to me. I would kind of build computers when I was younger, and I'll do all these things and mess around, and just sort of wasn't scared, you know, to break things and build them back up. And that's really how I learned. And so I got super into software, into hardware. And while I ended up in finance after school, I knew I didn't really belong. And when I had the opportunity, a couple, about 5 years after like the '08 crash, I left and started this consulting firm. And um, a lot of networking, a lot of boots on the ground, like here in New York City, you know, sweating, getting on the subway, meetings all day, and just, you know, one after another, referral after referral, and finally getting a project. And that sort of took me to a point where I had grown a team, and we were working on really cool startup, you know, apps here in the city. I'd meet a ton of people. I would go out and see what they wanted to build from a software perspective. And I met a lot of smart people, people that are way smarter than me. And it was one meeting where I sort of did this. It was like a fireside chat where I invited my own clients. It's kind of interesting now that I think about it. I invited my own clients to have this open space to talk about building, software. It was a very sort of like, let's empty out our pockets. Let's just be honest with each other. Let's talk about price. Let's talk about like what it takes. And it was a very nice, candid conversation. We had people that were not only clients that sort of just came in and watched. It was at a co-working space. I really enjoyed it. And then afterwards, I had a meeting with one of my clients who happened to be there. And we were talking about just all the things that, we were sort of thinking about around that time, related to the stuff that he was working on. And then he told me about, hey, have you heard about Bitcoin? Have you heard about Satoshi Nakamoto? And I remember that moment, it was yesterday, only because like in retrospect, it was such an important moment. But I sort of brushed it off. This was somebody that in some ways was very exploratory from sort of like a worldview, and I just didn't know where he was coming from. And so frankly, I was like, is he talking about anime? Is he talking about like Game of Thrones was big at the time? Understand like what Satoshi Nakamoto was. And as he was getting deeper into it, as someone that like just didn't have like the mindset, it sort of went right through me. But I couldn't, just take it for granted. This is someone that I knew and also respected. And, as I took the bus home from the city, I remember just hopping on Google, doing what normal people do, and going through some YouTube videos and just, after, a TED Talk, I think there was, and just, a few videos and a few websites down the line, I was like, oh my God, this could be, such a breakthrough. This could be such a mind-blowing technology. And then I think I spent the next, few weeks thinking about all the things it can solve. And then the next few months after that, just figuring out like, how do I get involved? And that's sort of how I remember the journey. Now, in between all of that, I was messing with ETH. I was in Binance, all while also, by the way, getting into stacks. I mean, one of the first things I wanted to do when I read the Bitcoin white paper was, how do I build on Bitcoin? I knew it was a technology. I understood that there was something more there. And smart contracts, which I didn't really understand at the time, but smart contracts on Bitcoin, I think was literally the header on the Stacks website. And I think it might have been Blockstack at the time. And so once I started to understand what smart contracts were and the ability to sort of decentralize your identity, which was one of the bigger things that Stacks had going for it at the time, I had grown up this team, and it was close to sort of our I wouldn't say we were at the top of the growth, but I think we were like 3/4 there. And we had a really strong team, probably 15, 20 people by that point. And, when you have a team that big, you start to optimize, you start to think about, okay, well, how can I leverage everyone's time effectively? And I had a few people that were a little bit less busy than others. And these are people I trust. And I said, hey, I want you to look into this. If you find it interesting, let's build something together. And, one thing led to another. And I had, this one engineer basically almost full time, working on understanding stacks, understanding the dynamics, and then ultimately, started to build some really cool things. And they were just very like first principles. It was like, what does, at the time there was sort of decentralized storage. It was called Gaia on Stacks. So can we run Gaia? Can we set up a wallet? It was just sort of like, sort of off the ground type stuff. But once we saw that we could actually do it and it wasn't some far-fetched thing that, maybe some mad scientist could crack, it became evident that, we really could have like our hands in this and be involved.
Isn't it crazy? You mentioned the moment you first kind of heard about Bitcoin. I remember it as well, as if it was yesterday. I remember my brother saying to me, he works in banking, and I remember him saying to me, "Have you heard about this thing, Bitcoin?" And if you speak to people who are in the space, so often they mention that story, when they first were, like you say, orange pilled. So, yeah, thank you for sharing that. But yeah, I remember my moment too. And strangely enough, I had the same inclination that you did. The minute I kind of had deep dived into it, I'm a sort of radical. I love reading. So I just basically read everything I could get my hands on. And then that was my first kind of reaction to it, specifically because I come from the music industry, was how do I make this work for creators? And so I started Googling, and pretty much I think it was obviously because Stacks was really the only thing that was out there at the time that was working to do this. And so I came across it. I came across Boom Wallet. I got some of the first boom boxes. So yeah, super awesome memories.
Yeah, it sounds like we got in around the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. And
Yeah.
isn't it interesting that you sort of, there are things that happen today that you think you're not going to remember, right? But then later, if they are important, they sort of like go up in the memory box and sort
Yeah.
of have like a little priority star next to them.
Yeah.
You can refer
Because I
back.
also don't think you realize at the time what is happening.
Yeah,
You kind of living your life. And I think especially also because kind of for all of us here, like a light went on and we were all like, so we kind of do it we were having this conversation just yesterday where we were saying how much we love what we do. So it's not a grind, really. It's kind of like you're enjoying every moment. Every moment feels super great. And afterwards, you're going to be like, hey, remember that, So
definitely.
yeah, it's a very exciting journey. So yeah, so you built Hey Layer, a marketplace on Stacks. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how that happened? And
Sure.
yeah.
So right around that time, as we sort of got into it and started developing on Stacks, as I said, I really sort of stuck to first principles. And the idea there was, what can we build that's super simple, super basic, and we came up with a decentralized storage mechanism. So it was sort of like Dropbox, but everything you put in, not only are you going to be decentralized from an identity standpoint because you've got your wallet, but now everything you add is going to sit on the blockchain. And that, just the simplicity of it, but also the potential breadth of what it could be used for, I think got a lot of people super excited. And so from there, things escalated really quickly because we had the MVP. I sort of knew how to do that. And once I had that, we were out talking to people in the city, online, Discord, the Stacks Discord, and places like that. And it was just very interesting. Storage is very fundamental for the internet. Web3 storage, I assume, will exist in different fashions. I think a wallet is just one representation of storage. So there's different ways of sort of running it, right? And because it was so new, so different, so fresh, but also so simple, I think people wanted to see where that can go. And that ultimately got us through, some grants, then ultimately into the first Stacks Accelerator, which is now run by the Bitcoin Frontier Fund. And we got to meet amazing people. I mean, this is where I met so many people from Stacks, whether it was, the people at Arcadico or Siegel or Block Survey, Alex, these are the people that we got to meet. And it was just an amazing thing to sort of grow up with them. And with that said, the market dynamics are their own sort of, they're just their own animal. Once you get into this world of building and venture capital and all the forces at play, things start moving in all these different directions. And so very quickly, we realized that storage was just not going to work from a product market fit perspective. And not only did we learn that ourselves by speaking to a lot of people, which was part of the Bitcoin Frontier Fund's process, but we also noticed that there were other storage companies, primarily coming from Ethereum, that just were really struggling. Companies were telling us that they were just not going to change their entire infrastructure to host these files. Again, in retrospect, you learn so much. And today, I know that from a compliance perspective, there's a huge market there. And so it's all about who you're after. But one of the things we also learned at the Stacks Accelerator Bitcoin Frontier Fund is, the market sort of has to be within reach, right? You can't go after something that you don't know anything about. It's going to take you hoops to jump through just to meet someone. And for me, because I was building apps, I was around entrepreneurs, I was around creatives, I had designers, developers, the people around me were building things. That wasn't the thing that was really going to take it over. And between that and, again, market forces, with all the things happening on Stacks, it was a really interesting time where marketplaces really were not even solidified. And there was this opportunity between all the people that we had spoken to say, look, let's build a marketplace. Let's build a marketplace on Bitcoin, leveraging Stacks. And I totally, agreed. I thought that the timing was right, as it was. And we came out really, it was one of the fastest products I've ever built. And when we launched, we had a lot of really good success. I think we ultimately ended up having 30,000 different mints. Not that we had 30,000 different users, but between all the users and all the things that were happening. And we did things our own way. I mean, again, it's one of those things where you live and you learn. Having sort of looked back at it all, I understand that we could have done so many things differently and better. But given the market dynamics, I think it was the right product at the time. And, it was an amazing learning experience in the sense that in some ways it was successful. In other ways, it wasn't the right product for Stacks. And while we continue to run it, I'm always rethinking about what that marketplace should really look like. And, happy to discuss some of the specifics on that. But ultimately, that was sort of the decision that wasn't necessarily a decision. It was more of, once we got going and we had a really great 6 months to a year, we had a really hard time as other marketplaces started to come up on Stacks. And I felt like they were doing it better in the sense that they really were looking at it from the ground up, whereas we were being fed from sort of the top down of, hey, this is the market, go get the market. I think what you do and what we've learned in Web3 is you really don't force anything down anybody's throats. It's got to be something that just comes together, that people want to be involved in on just a wide scale, where people will say, hey, this is something I support. This is something my buddy is using, and things like that. And I think we couldn't thread that needle. And one of the frustrations when you have that is you've got this product, but you don't have this clear understanding of what is the North Star, and even if you have it internally, it's almost like this thing fighting you in a sense of like, no, this isn't it. Yes, it is it. And so you go back and forth and you just feel like something isn't right. And as I watched, I'm friends with so many people on Stacks. And as I watched some of my friends like build out some of these other products, I was like, oh my God, this is what we should be doing. This is what we should be doing. But sometimes when you have, whether it's, VC money, this and that, the boat gets too big, right? And it's very hard to turn it. And I think it's really unfortunate. Like, we got there really fast. And so, between that and also having, bringing on two founders that I had success with prior, right, as I was building my consulting company, they were new to Web3. They didn't have the understanding and the love of Web3 that I did, from the perspective of, like, as we discussed, like, what this change, this new revolution, this new economy. And so I think it was a lot of like pulling, and forcing. And, from my perspective as the CTO, I could build all the technology in the world, but if the team's just not there, it's not going to lead to the success and the focus that it deserves. And I think that's ultimately where Haylayer stands today. And I'm very open about it because I'm humbled by it. Like, I've learned so much, and while it's active and I don't intend to take it down, it's just, it could be better. And maybe it's just because I'm hard on myself. But essentially, that's sort of where the lessons I learned. And I think there's still an opportunity, just like in any economy, for multiple marketplaces on stacks. I think there's a lot of different ways to sort of break an egg, and in some ways, potentially the metamorphosis of Haylayer might be this project that we're now working on. And so that's I'm excited about where we're headed.
Mm. Well, that's the thing, Gary, is, we were just talking about now, you kind of only can look retrospectively at your life and know why you were where you were and why what happened at the time. And, everything that we do is a piece of the puzzle of our journey that takes us where we're supposed to be. When I look back at what I was doing before I did this, I was extremely unhappy for a number of years in what I was doing. However, only now do I realize that equipped me even more so for what I need to do now. How it pushed me to find place in myself to kind of go deeper and deeper. It gave me strength. It gave me wisdom. So, these kind of things happen to take us to wherever we're supposed to go. There were a number of kind of other factors as well. Like you said, Stack still is so young. And at the time, I think 2 marketplaces is too much. I think it was, there's a number of reasons why. And I think very much potentially leading into what we do now, where this might be an iteration of it, just a little bit, maybe one step further. So, yeah, very exciting. I think, for where we're going and for where you've been, because that's given you as well the tools. So, yeah. So basically, before we move on to Gated, I just want to chat a little bit about MixMe, because I think there's some great relevance there in terms of what you're doing. But before we do that, I just want to move through the current music landscape, where it is right now, and the economy that exists, and the hope of the economy that we're moving into. I've got a couple of slides that we can go through. The first one is the global recorded music revenue by segment, just so you can kind of see what today's music industry looks like and where we have kind of challenges in the industry. So you can have a look there and see that the kind of the music industry generates revenue through these various streams, right? Subscription-based streaming, physical sales, licensing, and a whole bunch more. And of that entire sort of grouping of income where revenue is generated for artists, 65% of that is through streaming. There's still CDs and vinyl that are sold, but I mean, that's just under 20%, and performance rights, a small little under 10%. So this revenue is completely, it's not evenly distributed. And inside that 65%, and we'll have a look at a slide just now, most of that income is taken up by all the middlemen that have integrated themselves into this huge economy. And artists receive the most tiny fraction of that. So this just shows you how skewed the industry is right now in terms of what it looks like for music revenue. I've got another slide here as well. I just want to explore that streaming and share a little bit about how obviously it's become the dominant way people consume music. And it's projected to keep on growing. A lot of people say it's kind of reached its pinnacle, but it hasn't. I mean, the conversation's deep inside the music industry. It is definitely projected to keep growing. So you can have a look at that, and you can see over the years where they are talking about having these streaming grow, right? There's two kinds of streaming. If you have a look at that, there's the live streaming, and then there's your on-demand streaming, and they're growing kind of relatively. It's not like one is growing a whole bunch more than the other. And while streaming opens up new revenue models, I'm going to go back to that same statement I'm going to keep making. The payment models don't favor musicians ever. Payment models haven't favored musicians right from the beginning, really. But, the past happened. We need to focus on the present and rebuild the future. So I also just want to talk about, in the next slide, how we can look at music industry revenue versus artist revenue. Now, streaming music generates, or recorded music generates about $42 billion annually. Okay, so you can see now this doesn't include your merchandising, ticketing. This doesn't include all the things that sit around it, licensing, publishing. This is just your artist revenue and you can see there kind of the kind of revenues that the producers are making, that the agents are making, the managers are making, and then you can see again your platform costs for your Spotify as well, and your label costs. So you can see how that also just bites a huge big chunk out of where the earnings go. And I think this is, I just am talking about it a little bit before we move on to talking about what you're working on, because I really want it to be clear, and I want people to start understanding why there is this backlash, both from artists and the people who work inside the industry, against the revenue. Because, again, despite creating all this content, musicians just don't capture the profits. And it's, I made an analogy recently, and it was like something like, if you go to a bank and a builder takes out a loan to build a house, then he goes along and he buys all the bricks and everything, and he totally builds the house. And then the bank says to him, no, you've got to keep paying off that loan forever and ever. But we are going to rent your house to Airbnb, and they're going to then, rent it out to people. And no, you're not going to get anything for it. So it's this kind of bizarre thinking that just wouldn't make sense in the real world, And then the last slide I'm going to look at is just kind of what artists are actually earning on streams, and go through all the different platforms. You can have a look there. And it's so ironic that Napster, which the record labels broke down, took to court while they were building Spotify, and because they own shares in Spotify, the big labels. Mm-hmm. And ironically, Napster pays better than Spotify. So musicians would have been better off if they had any say in the decision. Musicians didn't have any say in that decision. But you can just have a look there. To earn $1 on Spotify, you need 229 plays of your track. Up to Amazon Music, which is 250 plays of your track. If you look at Pandora, they're winning there with 752 plays to earn $1. Anyway, so quite a scary chart,
Yeah, brings me back. You gotta love Napster. No, but it's it just, everything that we've sort of been hearing, this just puts it right out there. And it's just one of those things. I feel like musicians, artists, they sort of get dismissed. They're not taken seriously. It's almost like, okay, next one, goodbye, kind of thing. And knowing the people that go through this, uh, personally knowing musicians, I also like did some music production and stuff like that for fun, and like the amount of work that goes into it. I mean, it's like anything that you love. You put your heart and soul into this. And I guess, my perspective is I can understand that there's probably more people, and maybe you know more about this, that there's probably more people that can sort of join the creator economy, potentially, or at least get a chance to. And so then you've got this, like, maybe before you had like a river, now you've got an ocean. And it becomes difficult to sort of manage that ocean of musicians, um, and then also obviously to figure out, like, hey, which swimmer is the top swimmer, without knowing them personally. But then it sort of becomes this like sink or swim dynamic. And once you do figure out the algorithm, and once the money is being made, you don't sort of give them the playbook. You don't tell them, oh, okay, here's your chance to do it better. You just sort of, it seems like that part is kept away. So they figured out the best way to pull out, the revenue, like the best swimmer, identify the best swimmers, but they don't want to tell the swimmers. You know what I mean? And like that's kind of what I'm getting from this. And it's very sad to see. I mean, this is sort of like, fees on stacks, where you're like, oh, it'll never be $1, So it literally, it's pretty sad. And I know some amazing musicians that just all they do is hustle. So, kudos to everybody that is in the game and trying to survive. So,
well, that's also the sad thing. It's a massive part of our lives. It's everywhere. We all have music around us every day. We're touched by it in some way or the other. Whether you turn on Netflix and there's the opening music, whether you listen to it in your car, whether you put in your earpods while you at gym. So the thing is,
language, as they say.
Yeah. And I mean, a little known fact as well is the first record label is still one of the biggest labels in the world, 108 years later. And the big three hold it with, and because they own so much of the market, they just control it. There's no way. So when Napster came along, they saw immediately that they would lose hold of this income. If we were having peer-to-peer transactions, that would be it.
Yeah.
So they took Napster to court. And while that was happening, Daniel Ek was building Spotify and doing deals with the labels to give them, so he gave them shares so that he could get these better licensing deals. And that's how it happened. And when Sony sold half of its shares for hundreds of millions of dollars, it proceeded to buy up the rest of the music industry. So even though they're not all called Sony, they're pretty much all owned by and I mean, it's a very frustrating thing, because it's a very hard thing to break down, but I think ultimately, I spoke to Paul Thackeray last week, and he works, he was the MD of Sony. He was very senior at Apple after that. And I asked him at the end, what do you think the future holds? And he said, I think Web3 will eventually make Web2 go away. So it was very interesting coming from him, with his traditional background. But anyway.
No, 100%. Sorry, my boys asked me something and slipped my mind what I wanted to say, but I just came back to me. So we talk about sort of Bitcoin, right? And we sort of say like Bitcoin doesn't care. And it's something about that that's so powerful, because once you decentralize the entire thing, it's almost like the whether it's the record, they're just sort of like, no, because they lose the grip. Like they no longer become as relevant. All the decisions turn to the participants of the network. and then that's sort of like the idea behind the network state and all these things. So it almost becomes like a world of its own, like a moving economy of its own, that, as somebody like yourself, like, it's up to us whether we see this thing thrive or not. I truly believe that, given the dynamics at play, unless, every single nation comes like, hey, let's round up all these Bitcoin folks and, whatever, put them on like a island jail or something. I just feel like it's all up to us. I think that's the beauty of this thing is the movement, the energy behind this, everything that we're building. It's either like you can keep moving forward, or, you give up or you give in. And that's, knowing you, I think you're going to keep fighting for the creators, and I'm excited to sort of like be along on that journey and feel like we helped.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you straight up, I'll never stop. This is my life's work, and I'm going to do it here on Bitcoin, on Stacks. So, and I believe in it because I know so many artists. I know the industry, and I know that, what's interesting with music is that if you kind of look through the years from the original vinyl, CD, MP3 to streaming, it's changed in the way it is created, distributed, consumed, in every way, and it's moved very, very, very quickly, faster than probably 80% of the things on this planet. So it's something that does move with technology, and I think that's because it lives around us. So as GameFi develops, then music is going to develop with it. As FilmFi develops, so music. So all these things are around us that are going to also impact. As metaverses grow, then it's going to involve music. It's just as simple as that. So it's definitely has to happen. It's just who's going to do it and when is that going to happen. And the problem we've got, and I think we should maybe nip over to, while we're having this conversation, to, I think it's slide number 8, where I broke down the size of it. This multi-trillion-dollar. Oh no, I think it's the next one, Nick. Yeah. Thank you. This is worth trillions and trillions of dollars if you take it all together. The merchandising, the touring, the creation of music. That's an economy of its own. And because it's so complicated, fortunately, the labels, they've complicated things so much that it's not going to be very easy for them to shift. But this is a little bit small, but it gives you kind of a view of all the things that we need to look at when it comes to rebuilding the music industry. So you can see the giant job that there is, and all the avenues where there is funding, income generating. So, whether it's the creation of music, whether it's the distribution of music and how do people, actually end up hearing it, buying it. You've got all the media around it, the content creator, who's going to be creating that content. So this gives you an idea, like I said, of the size of the industry and where all that income comes from, and still artists don't make money. A lot of artists that I know that do really, really well, and I'm talking really, really well, still have another job. So, yeah. And unless we're only faced with the stories of the top 2%.
Right.
And a lot of the artists that I know often laugh because people think they're really loaded. It's this perception of like, you're playing in a stadium but you've got to ask yourself, why do these guys keep doing it? There's big bands that are still playing. Ask yourself why they're doing that. And a lot of the people don't write their own songs, and that's a whole income split on its own, the performer income. But anyway, so this is why what you're doing is so important, Gary, because it's a tiny tip of the iceberg that needs to be chipped away and chipped away and chipped away over the next 5, 10 years, because it's not going to happen in 2 years.
Well, yeah, and it's like we're having this conversation, and not too long ago, I spoke to my daughter. She just turned 6, like a few days ago on the 9th. And so, she tells me she wants to be a singer, and everything I want, like in the deepest, soul, my soul, like I just want her to be the best singer in the world, and like go on stage and like whatever she wants to do, like I'm down. I'm gonna support her, right?
Yeah, yeah,
But it's just so sad that I know like how difficult the reality of that actually is. And that's kind of what breaks me, because about when walls break, it just breaks me because my dad, who literally got like a PhD in music, like he finished college and then went to a conservatory and came to the United States and was basically disregarded as a nobody. And like that's fine. I don't, it's the game. But as you said, like if there's an opportunity to change the game, um, that would just be so powerful. And to do it for people like, just like my daughter, like people that actually, if if they really want something, why can't they be in a situation where, assuming they're good, right? We're not just gonna like, okay, yeah, you want to be a singer, you're a singer, but assuming you have real talent, like there needs to be some gold at the end of the rainbow. You know what I mean? And it just doesn't seem fair at the moment.
Well, that's the thing. If you think, you're graduating from school, you've studied music. Let's even say you've gone as far as studying music. So you have a degree, just like anybody else who has a degree. You could even get your master's and your PhD, just like anybody else. And yet, if you say to your parents, I want to go and do that, they're literally going to be like, okay. Because it's as much as you work as hard, if not often harder, and make more sacrifices, there's very little potential at the end of the rainbow. However, that's all about to change. We are part of the group of people that are going to build something that changes all of this for artists. Like I said to you earlier, that is my life's work, and I'm never going to give up doing it. So be prepared, Spotify.
Well, people like you that disregard all the walls. You disregard all the barriers, and you say, well, that doesn't apply to me, and let me show you why. And then it's sort of the doing that speaks for everything. So I applaud you. I've been a fan of yours ever since we started speaking, and yeah, it's been great. It's been really good seeing that you don't necessarily just talk, and you get out there, and just like you're doing today, it's the weekend. You are preaching your message, right? And that's kind of like that's the hard part. So yeah, I appreciate you doing that day in and day out.
Thanks, Gary. And I also just want to point out as well, I was speaking to somebody yesterday and I was saying it is just incredible working with you because nothing is a problem. And obviously it's a problem, but because we all know that everything we're doing, let's not use the word problem, let's say challenge. We all know that everything we're doing is a massive challenge. And yet, when we have our conversations and I'm randomly breaking down the entire music industry with these bizarre expectations, you just go for it, and it's incredible to meet someone. The call we had yesterday with Reese as well, with Blockweb, it was just like, okay, this is a crazy idea, but why not? And I think that kind of attitude is a really great attitude for for people out there to have and to recognize. We all have to recognize that what we're doing is a challenge, and it's not going to be as easy as just going out and getting a normal job, because this is recreating jobs. This is recreating economies.
I mean, I think we talked about this too. I'm generally an optimist. You had mentioned that you were as well. I've never really seen life as a cakewalk, but I really don't think it was meant to be. I think we make our own. I sort of have this thing in my head, like I think we make our own choices. We wake up, we can decide, and not always. Like I've been through some fairly depressive times where I'm like, I thought I could change my mood today.
Yeah.
But I think as long as the general your health is there, right, and the people you care are there around you, etc., and you've got a lot of the basics met, I think at that point you can then decide, like, how am I going to be in this world, and I don't know. I just, yeah, I love people that keep moving forward in the face of adversity. That's like, one of my yeah, like when I watch sports, or when I watch like music, I love people that have that story. And so because it just shows me all the things, and I think all the people that don't even talk about them have them as well. They've just learned how to sort of internalize that, which is amazing. So
Yeah.
it's difficult, but yeah, I love where we're going.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that. Let's kick it off with a little bit more about Bitcoin stacks. For those people that are watching this, that might not be too familiar with the power of Bitcoin and how powerful Stacks is as a partner to Bitcoin. So, do you want to just talk about Bitcoin a little bit? What it is, what the secure store of value means, what decentralization means, and where Stacks plays a role in opening up the limitations of Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's a loaded question. I don't, I know we don't have too much time. I just think that if you look at money, and again, I'll be as fast as I can. If you look at money, you kind of realize that money has changed over time. And if you look at where the world is going, you sort of see that, I don't want to go crazy and say multiplanetary, but you can, if you want to imagine like the timeline of sort of like the fact that we had planes, then we have rockets, then we sent people to the moon and all these weird things. But it's not even about that. It's just about the fact that there are things that happen over time, and that sometimes happen either because of technology or in spite of technology. And sometimes technology just meets the moment. And I think with this evolution of money, from like clams, counting clams, to stones, to silver, to gold, to silk in between, and all these little things.
Flowers.
I mean, then you get to, you're right. Then you get to tacos, right? And then you get to, this point of like the credit card, it's almost like the CD. You've got the credit card. So now you don't have to, the cash first, right? So I'm kind of like going back and forth here, but you've got the cash, then you've got the credit card. And it's like, okay, but we've got computers. I can DM somebody. I should be able to send them money, and we got that too, right? And that was like PayPal or Venmo or whatever. But it doesn't go far enough to truly remove the boundaries that provide the potential of a real transformational economy. The people that were lucky enough to sort of sit at the top of banks and then have these legacy relationships, as you had mentioned, right? The $180-year-old music company, like those people have already, they've already have a seat at the table. And I think what cryptocurrency does is it gives all of us a seat at the table. We just have to be in. And I think as you start to understand the different dynamics and the different cryptocurrencies, you start to understand, well, just like there's different chat rooms or different platforms, there's a reason for different currencies. Like you may go on X to meet with your crypto buddies. You go on Reddit to get some like silly memes or whatever. And in that same space, there's a currency for every moment almost. And that doesn't mean there's going to be a million currencies. Although if you follow like the nation state, you can kind of think that it's possible that different ideas will have their own currency, different countries tied to their own crypto, for example. But on just a higher level, it's like we need something like that to work. And if you look at all the things that have been built, and as you get through, you kind of learn, one of my first experiences that was Binance, right? And I was in the Binance Smart Chain and BNB, and in the throes of like the pump and dump of like 2017 when I first got in, like late 2017. You sort of know after a while, like, I don't think this is it, And so you go through, it's like you open the one door, you're like, who's here? I don't know about this one. Who's here? And so once you kind of learn the dynamics of the thing, you're like, I think this Bitcoin one is a little bit better for, reasons X, Y, and Z. Just like we come up with other, things that we decide on, like in life, right? Like why one rocket engine is better than another, one car, whatever, airbags, you can kind of go endlessly with the analogies. So it's like, yeah, and Bitcoin just has all of those things. It's not, a lot of people say it's made out of thin air. Well, it's not made out of thin air because you've got to trade energy for it. So, it checks so many boxes. I wrote something called Why Bitcoin Matters. I think I wrote it I think I wrote it in 2020, but it's just my perspective on the dynamics. And I just sort of try to break it down in human terms. And yeah, it just talks about like, oh my God, there's this thing that lives outside the bank, that no one can touch, no one can turn off, no one can say no. And then, once you start to dig in, you say, okay, well, you know what? The trade-offs are energy. Well, how do you solve that? Oh my God, you can build something like Stacks. Stacks then takes existing energy. I think I've been saying this for years. I look at Bitcoin as like the energy core, right? You look at the sci-fi movies, there's like that orb. Mm-hmm. And then things are like, whether it's wires or things are tied to it, and all the things around it are the things that are sort of moving and using that energy. And I think Stacks is one of those things. It's almost like a flywheel that generates more power from the energy core, right? As it attaches every transaction to Bitcoin. So I know that was a little bit, that wasn't detailed and technical, but it's just how I look at the dynamics when it comes to crypto.
Yeah, and it's often, I find, in a way, better to talk about it that way. I talk to people and I see them glaze over when I start, and then I kind of move into analogies. One of the analogies I use with people is that if you imagine that Bitcoin is the gold, because that's easy for them to imagine, and then Stacks is the jeweler, and the apps are the jewelry. So that it just works through it to bring you something that you can use. Otherwise, it's just a big chunk of gold, Yeah. So so here we've got Stacks. We're on Stacks. There's different things. I mean, people often go back and they talk about ordinals. There's people who've been very successful on ordinals, like Violetta. She's just sold a piece of music for 1 Bitcoin. So yeah, amazing. Very amazing. I mean, beautiful. She's really bringing attention to what you can do on Bitcoin. At the same time, for your average musician, it's very difficult to do that. And also for the types of music that a lot of people make. There still are singer-songwriters. There still are musicians. And as much as you can make music with just your phone and an auto-tuner or with AI, there really are still singer-songwriters. There will always be singer-songwriters. There will always be bands. And that kind of music is very difficult to fit onto the very small file sizes that we have available with Bitcoin. Obviously, as well, I mean, we've just seen the network costs go up, the network fees go up from 4 sats per VByte last week, and last night there were 40 sats per VByte. That's what happens the minute, and that's obviously because of all of this going on with runes at the moment. So it does move up very quickly. That obviously becomes very difficult, especially when you're talking about tracks and you want to sell tracks at low cost. So those are the benefits with Stacks. With Stacks, you can put on the file size can be as big as you like. You can put video to your music. and you've got very, very low transaction fees. And obviously, after the Nakamoto upgrade, we're looking at faster transaction times that you would be doing on Bitcoin. So, yeah,
When
Nakamoto, namaste. Yeah. So I think, Stacks to me, again, seems the obvious route for music. It needs to be inexpensive with the fees. That's the problem with Ethereum. You're paying $15-20 to buy a track that is $10, but all right, so we've got a slide up here about MixMe. So let's move into that because we are on the hour. We're probably going to go over a little bit. Please excuse us. The conversation got very interesting for me. But let's talk about MixMe because that's where it started for you, kind of moving into eventually Gated.
Yeah, it was. It was. I think it was just sort of meant to be in the sense that as I was contemplating, how I'm involving in the space and how what the next step is, I sort of dug it back into smart contracts. I wanted to have with Haylayer, I was a product manager more, so to speak, because I have engineers, and I wasn't the one doing the smart contracts. And here is a time where one of Haylayer's fans, Sandy Hoover, a great Stacks contributor, came to me and said, "Hey, look, there's this idea I have. It involves really managing contributions, music contributions when it comes to royalty payments and distribution and things like that. What if there was a way that we can have these loops that people create, and then someone can literally mix it on a DJ mixer, and then out comes an NFT." As someone who's passionate about music, who DJ'd, on the DL throughout my teen years, it's how the girls got to know me and like me. I'd always have my little turntables I could show off and things like that. It was a no-brainer to me. Like I love everything about music mixing. I love everything about NFTs, and so to bridge those together, I was like, this is an opportunity for me to learn clarity better, build something I would be excited about, and hopefully help the community. So that's what this is all about. So I spent some time working on it, and I'm really excited about how it came out. And thanks to D grants, we're able to push it sort of right now, focusing on the licensing side, right? How can we figure out what the right licensing looks like, so that when you mint these as NFTs, they can be valued in appropriately, and everybody gets paid appropriately over time. So that's where this is going. And frankly, just to be able to keep building music products for Stacks it would give me so much joy, because it would just mean we're lifting up musicians and driving the economy. So it's a we-win kind of thing, and I'm excited to be a part of it.
Yeah, it's a very important part of the process of releasing music, and a part that sort of traditional NFTs haven't quite or can't quite manage. So, and what Sandy's doing, I think, is really important, and the effort that she's putting into it is incredible as well. I think she's got a big job ahead of her, but I do look forward to the day where this is solved, and these licensing issues, because it's very difficult, not only from doing it properly or from the musician's point of view when you start, but also then the usage of that. People can just take it and use it anyway. And in this big wide world, that's very difficult to find unless it's being tracked as well. So there's a huge job on that side as well, but a very exciting one. So, all the best with MixMe. And I think very much ties into what's going on with Gated. So let's talk about how that started and then where it's going with what we're doing with When Walls Break and BlockTune music.
Yeah. So I think Gated is frankly just an evolution of where I think Haylayer should have been, could have been, and where it's frankly going. Um, what I saw from my experience in running a marketplace is that people just want control. They want to be able to do things in Web3 just like they did them in Web2. They don't necessarily like the boundaries that have been set. Um, and so with that is, it's sort of, uh, it becomes difficult because people wanting to do what they want to do is just very vast. So it's like, okay, well, what does that really mean? So you need to put some kind of, boundaries around that. Um, but at the same time, it's exciting because it makes sense. Just because we're decentralized, and for example, the OpenSea, figured out a really smart way to sort of allow people to go in and participate, doesn't mean that that's Web3 for everybody. Some people just are not going to go into OpenSea. They're not going to interact with NFTs in the way that a lot of us do, that are sort of early in the game. And I think this is just a natural evolution of where things are going. And so the idea behind Gated is, let's allow creators to uh, create, didn't mean to use that twice, but, come up with these places where they can feel free to express themselves, but also get paid, and I think if you want to kind of think about similar projects, you probably want to think about, Patreon comes to mind, something like a Substack, so all of these platforms that sort of say, hey, you get a page, you get to decide what goes on there. A lot of it is pre-built so that it looks really good. You don't have to worry about the coding. Ultimately, it's all about, here's my link, here's how awesome this thing is that I made, please, enjoy it. And so that's what we're doing. And I think I'm lucky to have, because we were working on Mix Me and actually started a conversation with you. I'm lucky to have come up with sort of the first part of Gated, and the first, uh, first way for artists to get exposed is through this music album concept, which I think is brilliant. The idea here is you've got your music album. You can mint the entire album, or you can mint track by track, or you can mint just one track. You can preview the song for 30 seconds, and each song comes with other goodies, just like it did back in the 90s when I would open like cassettes and find like the little booklets and the drawings. And so there's a lot there, but I think ultimately the goal is, how do we deliver it in a way that's fun, that allows people to feel like they are getting heard from the creator side, but and also like from the from the distribution side and the consumer side.
Mm. Yeah, it's fantastic, and like I said earlier, I've loved working with you on this because I think it's come out. It's very simple for people to use. It showcases the music beautifully, and it showcases the art behind the music. So I just want to go back to that slide, and if we can, Nick, just zoom in to the actual. I think I made it a little bit small, but I just want to look at what Gated actually looks like, so you can get an idea. The audience can get an idea of what to expect. So if we kind of zoom in a little bit to the actual image there, you'll see how at the top you've obviously got your album title. Um, you're going to see the artworks are all blurred out. Now, what we did with this album, we got 8 singer-songwriters. They all created an original track, and they were all hooked up with an artist, and the artist created artwork inspired by the music. The artists are all real Stacks OGs. They're very well known artists in the ecosystem. And the artwork obviously goes very beautifully with the thing. So you can see there it's track by track. You're going to be able to see how many tracks there are, how many have been sold from that track. You're going to be able to see who created the artwork. And then you have your buttons on the left-hand side where you can buy either the album, or you can click on each one of these tracks and you will see a buy button as well. And then you have a player. So you can click on each one of those tracks and you can listen to a sample of each of the tracks. And if you like what you hear, you can then click on the buy button and own the NFT as well, and then be able to play the full tracks in your player. So this is the kind of first iteration of it. I know Gary and I have got a lot of ideas to grow this out, but even in its first iteration, it is really easy to use, and it really works in a way that I think people are familiar with when they are consuming music.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I'm excited to drive the music industry forward, at least on Stacks.
Yeah, and so I've just put a slide up here. Again, these are the 8 artists that I mentioned. They're all when I was putting the album together, I selected artists that I thought would sound very different, but also you could listen to them without the album sounding too, erratic or whatever. So very carefully produced. The artists are all very successful in their own right in Web2 on Spotify. However, we're not going to release this album on Spotify. The album is going to be released purely for the Stacks market. It's been curated and produced very much exclusively for the Stacks market. So those are the 8 artists. Each one of them, as I said, worked with a visual artist. So when you purchase your track, you're also going to get a very beautiful piece of art that you will hold in your wallet. So yeah, I think we're reaching the end of the show. As I mentioned earlier, the album is called When Walls Break. It's coming out through BlockTune, which is the music. I don't really want to call it label. I'm still trying to figure out another word for it. But I'm going to be helping the musicians find independence and lead them through a way for them to rightfully earn and to rightfully have dignified earning, dignified income. So that is very important for me. But yeah, so it's going to be minting on Gated the 19th of November. You can follow Gary at what is it? It's Gary. Yeah, Gary Raja. Very easy, one word. You can follow This Kitty Is Good, which is my social media. You can follow Stacks Link, which is a kind of platform that is a gateway to the Stacks ecosystem. So if you are new to Stacks, please head over to Stacks Link, one word, on Twitter. That's going to really help you navigate what Stacks is and how to get involved. We're going to be having weekly shows leading up to the album. From next week, I'm going to be chatting each week to one or two of the musicians. They will be performing live for you. Awesome. So if you'd like to experience a little bit of who the artists are, what they sound like, and a little bit of live music on a Saturday afternoon, please join us. We are here at, I want to say my time now, but it's 9 a.m. ET on a Saturday on Twitter and on YouTube. So yeah, I think for me, I'm just really excited about it. I'm really excited. It is a big iceberg that we have to break down, but we've got to start somewhere. And we're looking at licensing, and we're looking at a music platform that's usable. And the beauty of these things are they're creator first. Most of everything else out there, whether it's in Web 2 or Web 3, hasn't been built with creator first in mind, and that is the priority here. So yes, just very happy to have you, Gary. Would love to hear any final thoughts from you as well before we close out for the day.
I just want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to BitcoinLiveDB, and I think I think we're just lucky to have you. Thank you for doing this and bringing us all together. And if anybody needs me or wants to chat more about this or anything else, I'm here. So that's it. I just want everyone to have a good weekend.
Awesome. Thank you to me as well. There's a slide up now about Bitcoin, Stats Link. And I also just want to say as well, thank you to everybody who's tuned in and listened to the show. Very, very grateful for your time. I hope you enjoyed it. Also very grateful to Gary for joining me on his Saturday afternoon, and to Nick at BitcoinLiveDB as well for giving us some excellent production. And just wishing you all a happy weekend. And I hope this has inspired you to, if you aren't in the music industry, I hope this has inspired you to go and explore it a little bit more. I hope we are encouraging musicians to also just explore. We do have on the GoodKitty website, goodkitty.xyz, we do have a submissions form there. If you are interested in coming on board with BlockTune, with Gated, we would love to have you. We have got a number of people who have put their music forward. I'm excited to sit with Gary and go through that. Looks like the next album might be hip hop. I'm getting a lot of hip hop submissions. This one is a singer-songwriter album. So I hope people enjoy that as well. I hope for support from the Stacks community. And if anybody's got any questions, please let me know. I'm here. My DMs are always open. So thanks to everybody. Thanks to Nick again. Thanks to BitcoinLiveDB. And thanks to you, Gary.
Okay.
Speak to you soon.
Thank you very much.